Yes. Namaste and good evening on behalf of Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development at IMPRI Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, and India Water Portal. I, Ritika Gupta, Assistant Director at IMPRI, welcome you to IMPRI Hashtag Web Policy Talk. Today we are here for a special talk on climate emergency, disasters and resilience inclusive business continuity management by Dr. Anil Kumar Gupta. I would now like to welcome our moderator for today, Dr. Simi Mehta, who is CEO and Editorial Director at IMPRI. Ma'am, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ritika. Good evening to one and all, and I extend my warm welcome to you. Disasters triggered by natural, biological, and technological hazards, and further exacerbated by climate extremes and slow onset events, annually affects a growing number of people around the world, and it also affects the ecosystems and also the economies. The living beings are suffering massive casualties, which is leading to rising economic and climate change frequencies and also the magnitude of range of climate related hazards. Actually, without significant investment in resilient building and also these impacts not only threaten but also decelerate in extreme cases, the progress that has been achieved so far, in fact, also decelerate the targets of the Sustainable Development Goals in realizing the 2030 agenda. As was demonstrated by the inclusion of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction and also the Paris Agreement, the disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation are vital strategies for the implementation and achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Very unfortunately, on February 7, 2021, our hill state of Uttarakhand witnessed a glacier disaster of incredible proportions. The number of casualties and injuries are still to be tallied, but this avalanche has in the Alaknanda River has actually washed away hydroelectric stations, bridges, and a number of invaluable infrastructure. In fact, the 2013 monsoon floods in the state should have been a learning lesson to review the development projects in the area. Where did we fall short of? And why is there a lack of seriousness among the people and policy alike to protect the environment and lessen the avarice of short-term monetary gains? How many more such events do we wish to witness before the furies engulfs us all? To discuss these and beyond, we have with us none other than Professor Anil Kumar Gupta, Professor of Policy and Strategies, Disaster Risk Reduction and Sustainability, and Head of the Division and the Program Director, Center for Excellence and Climate Resilience at National Institute of Disaster Management, a body under the Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India.
Yes, sir. Saraswati Mata.
Professor Anil Kumar Gupta has an experience of more than 25 years working with national, subnational, and business administrations, and he is a very important human resource and has the credit of
Thank you, madam.
Of national and sectoral disaster management plans, human resource capacity development plans, national action plan for chemical disaster management, national drought manual, institutional expansion and strengthening plan, and has guided several subnational planning, climate actions, SDG implementations, and pilots. He has been a member of government and ministerial delegations abroad and has contributed to international policy processes like the Bangkok Declaration, Sendai Framework, etc. Professor Gupta is also an expert team member of World Meteorological Organization's Climate Statement, South Asia Group, core group member of IUCN, the Commission on Ecosystem Management, and also the Vice Chairman of the Association of Occupational and Environmental Health in India. Sir has been awarded a number of awards like the Young Scientist Award in Forestry and Environment, Excellence Award by the Society of Environmental and Occupational Health, and also was bestowed with fellowship, senior fellowship by IDRC Canada's think tank Initiative for Policy Research. Sir is also an elected fellow of Earth Scientist Society, and was founder, faculty head, and director acting of the Institute of Environment and Development Studies at Bundelkhand University prior to joining NIDM in 2006. Thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation and joining us this evening. I now invite you to make your presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Very good afternoon. And I am happy that IMPRI is taking this initiative of series of talks on very important issues. In fact, I was looking at the previous topics that you have chosen, and I'm very impressed with the kind of topics that you choose and kind of the speakers and experts that you bring, because they as we have been discussing about the sustainable development goals, and if we look the coverage of these 17 goals, we find that the things are so dynamic and things are so vast. And moreover, what we have witnessed in past 10 months period, that has been kind of a greatest experience. We could gather the experience in past 10 months worth equal to more than 2 decades, because this was a global pandemic, which was a kind of a global disaster. But in between, we faced a lot of other kind of disasters also in the same period. That is why we say that this 7, 8 or 10 months period was not one disaster, but it was a complex emergency situation, because we had 3 cyclones in India. One of that was a super cyclone Amphan. We had a number of industrial accidents. We had the climatic extremes like heat wave. We had drought kind of situation. We had flooding, and we had recently a major glacial flood also. We also had locust attack, the very rare kind of locust attack, because it was very devastating. So a number of disasters have been affecting us, and very recently we also faced bird flu. So all kind of disaster, in fact, we could witness in this past 8 or 10 months period. So talking about disasters, and talking about disasters in the reference to climate change, and then looking climate change implications as an emergency, is a kind of something which is highly warranted, not only internationally but at national level and also local level. Just it was yesterday evening, the Honorable Prime Minister was participating in the World Sustainable Development Summit, and he was sharing the dais with the head of the state of government of Maldives, and they both the leaders, they were very loud on their views on the requirement of our need to focus on dealing with climate change, considering it as a global and national emergency. In fact, they also discussed that the climate change is not only the matter of the kind of small scale disasters, but it is also a very important kind of challenge for national security, because there are issues of migration, there are issues of that leading to conflicts between the boundaries, because many times even the boundaries shift because of the erosion, the flood related flood induced erosion, and these kind of things, rivers change their course. So there are a lot of issues which gave rise to conflicts, sometimes for because of the limited resource, for example, limited access to water, or limited availability of the water resource. There is conflict between two parties. That parties may include 2 states or 2 countries, or sometimes industry and society. So there are so many dimensions of looking at climate change issues. I have brought a PowerPoint here, although the PowerPoint presentation is a little long, so I will be skipping some of the topics. But most important topics I will be touching upon here. To give an idea that what has been our take in India about climate change, particularly looking at climate change related emergencies or climate change related disasters, and then how we try to deal with these things, and how we try to integrate those issues with the planning process, developmental planning process. So is my PowerPoint visible?
It is visible, sir.
Yeah. So this picture also shows that we have two options. Either we keep on facing the challenge of climate change, and we keep on contributing to the onset of climate change, or we visualize to a greener future, and then we work together and make concerted efforts to address the climate change. What is important here that the climate change related awareness has taken a global arena. I would say that although we were talking about global warming and climate change for quite a long time, but it was 2007, year of 2007, when the IPCC, that is Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and the Vice President of the US, they both got jointly the Nobel Prize for their work. So that brought this news brought actually some kind of a global awakening that this issue is very important. And since then, actually, then we started looking at that how climate change is aggravating the challenges of human sustainability on this earth, and also contributing to newer or existing disaster risk. Very interestingly, that was the period in disaster management. The period was called as Hyogo Framework for DRR. Hyogo Framework for DRR was from 2005 to 15, and where very interestingly, the priority 4 of this Hyogo Framework, in short we can say HAFA, Hyogo Framework of Action, the priority 4 that is very important to mention here, that was addressing underlying factors of risk. So very important that many times we go and look at the end of pipe approach. So what is happening outside, but what is actually beneath the surface? What is the root causes? What are the fundamental issues? Those are very important in understanding the disaster risk. And more to this, interestingly and also surprisingly, this priority 4 of HFA became the priority 1 in Sendai Framework for DRR. And now we say that the priority 4 of Sendai Framework is understanding disaster risk. And some people will laugh that we are working in disaster management for 4 decades or 5 decades, and now we are saying understanding disaster risk is our first priority. It means we did not understand the disaster risk. But yes, actually disaster risk is so dynamic that with climate change, it has become so complex. And our understanding of disaster risk 15 years or 20 years before, and our understanding of disaster risk is now very different. Now we have realized that it is the vulnerability that is very important. Hazards may be natural, but vulnerability is often man-made or human-induced. We can say anthropogenic. As there is a famous saying, and also there is a famous book with the title "Vulnerabilities Does Not Fall from Sky." So that is important. So does not fall from sky means the rainfall can fall from sky, but the poor building design is not falling from sky. It is our own mistake. The poor drainage design is our own mistake. So this is just to give an understanding that it is our own good management or bad management of our resources, our infrastructure, our facilities, and our activities that can make us more vulnerable to these kind of natural hazards. And natural hazards are being aggravated by the impact of climate change. And there is a protocol called Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Management for 2015 to 30. For the same period, we have an international protocol where India is a party, Paris Climate Agreement, and we are also party to the new development goals, our global goals, that is called as Sustainable Development Goals. So this is very important, and that is why currently now we are focusing on evidence-based or indicator-based assessment, so that we have some kind of a quantitative estimates. Now, this is about the interlinkages. I have already referred that climate change is known to aggravate our wind pattern and alter our rainfall pattern. So it can change, it can aggravate the hazards, but it is the vulnerability of the land, people, infrastructure, ecosystem that actually makes this hazard to be realized as disaster. So heavy rainfall not necessarily causes flooded. but our poor drainage will make the heavy rainfall to cause flooding. So this is kind of one example I'm giving. Now this is a very interesting picture. It shows that we all know in our developmental economics and developmental studies that we need to exploit environment for improving our development, and that we do. We have to exploit water, we have to exploit our natural resources for development. But this Kuznets curve tells that we keep on exploiting the environment, but the per capita prosperity doesn't continue to increase after some time. Then it starts a lag phase. So we keep on exploiting environment, but we are declining, the development is declining. And actually that is being reflected in the continuous decline or continuous stagnation on our economic growth rate globally. We say that for achieving SDG by 2030, we need to have a global growth rate, economic growth rate of around 12%. But nowhere in the world, everywhere it is 5%, 6%, 7% are like this past 15 years. So that is indicating that ecological slowdown is the actual cause of the economic slowdown. So that understanding is very important. Now, this is another dimension that we know that disasters can cause deaths and devastation to the resources and infrastructure. But now we have realized that with the efforts in early warning system, better preparedness, better use of technology, we could reduce the loss of life in disasters. But on the other hand, the number of people affected by disasters and number of disasters are increasing. So this is a kind of a dichotomy that we like file in cyclones. We see that earlier 10,000, 15,000 people used to die in cyclone, but now hardly 1 or 2 persons or 4 persons are they lose their life. I'm in a meeting for 30 minutes. Then this picture is very interesting. This shows that all kind of disasters are increasing, but this also shows that the disasters which are related with water and climate are increasing more. For example, drought, flood, extreme weather, these kind of disasters are increasing more rapidly as compared to other disasters. So this is telling that how climate change is more important for us to look at these kind of issues. Then this is again very interesting. For quite a long time, we have been believing that it is a low income group which is affected most by disasters. But recent past, the trend has changed. Now, in fact, it is the lower middle income group which is affected more. Why? Because they have better social aspirations, they have higher social aspirations, and they move to cities and industrial areas, but they do not have adequate resources in terms of money and other things. So they are bound to occupy the unsafe locations in our cities. For example, slums and other kind of locations which are hazardous locations in cities, and they occupy those areas, and then they are bound to lose their life. How the Disaster Management Act of India has referred to climatic issues and environmental issues, we can just look at this definition given by Disaster Management Act, definition of disaster, and it is mentioned here that environment, and when it refers to that substantial loss of life. So life does not mean only human life. It also takes into account animal life and plant life also. So our Disaster Management Act has also incorporated damage to environment, damage to any kind of ecosystems, damage to environment, damage to life. All are important facets in understanding the definition of disaster. Now, this is very important. Many times we put blame on climate change. Many times we are not taking care of our urban systems. We are not taking care of proper for infrastructure. For example, our drainage is poorly designed, or our land use is faulty. Our wetlands are vanishing. That we are converting to filling with the land. We are converting to the real estate or the buildings. We are encroaching our rivers. We are constructing faulty buildings, not looking to the flood heights. And then we blame everything to climate change. I say that it is not correct, because it is not only the climate change which is the culprit, but there are non-climatic actors which are very important. And non-climatic actors are related, for example, how the city governance is taking place, taking these things, how our housing design is being done, how the urban planning is being done, how our regional planning is being done. Whether we are constructing a road, so are we designing our culverts properly to provide proper drainage or not? So these things are equally important, and that is why I say that climatic actors are important, but equally are the non-climatic and environmental actors which are important. So this is in nutshell a picture that shows a relationship between all these factors: climate change, disasters, and development. So in fact, disasters, there are three angles. For example, the extreme weather events, but vulnerability that I informed, that I shared about. But exposure is also important, where we are located. For example, if we have constructed any of the building in the riverbed, for example, in Delhi, we sometimes discuss the example of Akshardham. So these kind of things, if we construct any kind of important infrastructure in the hazard-prone areas, then we should not complain the river. We should not put the blame on climate, or we should not put blame on the ecosystem or environment. So the development, disasters, and climate are quite interrelated. Then again, the new dimension, that how do we look at the kind of long-term issues. Like many times we talk of managing one particular incident, like managing a particular flood. Yes, that is important. That we call it the crisis management or the risk management. But it is important that we start looking at the unknown scenarios. For example, the coronavirus pandemic also was a highly unknown scenario. The recent flood in Uttarakhand was also a highly unanticipated scenario. So we need to have better resilience, and for that we need to have adaptability. We say that we should have thought that this kind of we should anticipate the unknown things also, and unknown things like the black swan events, we say that, which are least probable, but whenever they take, are highly devastating, are highly damaging kind of events. So that is important. So whenever like we had this two power plants, like both were washed away in this recent flood. So when we built these power plants, did we visualize that any kind of glacier flooding can take place? And why if we did not visualize, why we should not visualize? So that was an important thing. When we placed our contract workers at some locations, did we visualize that any kind of casualty, any kind of calamity can take place? And if we visualize, did we train our workers to have a better understanding of the risk so that they can save their life? Probably there is a question mark. So this is important. But again, we have to go one step ahead. Now, we have been discussing about disaster resilience or climate change adaptation for our own generation. Now we have to start looking for the next generation also, because very shortly our generation is going to be phased out by the next generation. So what is the climatic system, or what is the environment system, or what is the type of development we are going to give to our next generation? So whatever climate change adaptation or whatever disaster risk reduction we are doing should only for our generation, but the future generation. And future generation does not mean that my own children are the children of my friends. But I am also talking of the future generation of professionals, future generation of engineers, future generation of doctors, that what kind of challenges they are going to face in their profession also. And that is why I often to refer to
Is there a problem?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's stuck. Professor Gupta, can you hear us? Arjun, can you check, please?
I'm checking.
I think it was got disconnected. Is it working now?
Yes, sir. So if you could put your PPT back.
Okay, okay. Yeah. Now I think it is okay.
Yes, from here. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank
Now
you.
good, no problem. Yes, sir, please. Yes.
These are minor disasters we have to face.
Also uninvited, sir.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So anyway, so that is also a lesson, and now we are discussing with the business community, and also with some of the business schools. I have taken an initiative that let us look at make a kind of a review of the current business continuity regime, and look at that how businesses should sustain and business should have the resilience against the impact of disasters. For example, I will give an example of other kind of disasters also. On Jammu Kashmir highway, there are either landslides sometimes, or there are dense fog even incidences are taking place. And whenever there is a dense fog, there are several accidents that also takes place. We come to this kind of news on many of our highways, including Jammu Kashmir highway. But Jammu Kashmir highway, whenever there is kind of these kind of disasters take place, then Jammu Kashmir highway is also known for transporting lot of fruit products or fruits coming from the Kashmir Valley region, and all those products are the perishable goods. And similarly, there are so many such kind of products which are perishable, and whenever their kind of disaster take place, I'm just giving one example.
Professor Gupta, your voice is not audible. Professor Gupta, when you started with the example, you're not audible. No, 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 not audible, sir. You're not audible. No, you're not audible. Is it for me only? Arjun, can you hear?
नहीं सर, कोई बात नहीं सर, एक बार ना फिर से आउट होकर फिर से सर लॉग इन कर लेंगे ना तो थोड़ा ठीक हो जाता है।
नहीं, not audible, sir. No.
सर कोई बात नहीं, एक बार मीटिंग लीव करके फिर से ज्वाइन कर लीजिए तो ठीक हो जाता है।
Suddenly it just
यस,
was.
कोई बात नहीं सर, विल कम, नो प्रॉब्लम।
Till then, I would request the audience, if you have any specific questions for sir, you could put them on the chat box.
आ गया?
हाँ sir, आ गया. Thank you.
यस,
Yes.
Allow me to share the screen.
Yes.
यस
Sir.
प्लीज।
Is it visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Ji. I'm sorry for the disruption. Ji.
No problem, sir. Totally understandable. Yes.
So now we have taken this as a very, very important dimension, and that how corporate sector and businesses should look at disaster resilience as an important component for business continuity and business resilience. And in fact, when I use the word business, does not mean that any kind of a profit-making intervention. Even the urban water supply is a business. Are providing regular health facility to the victims or to the patients. That is also a kind of business. And for example, recreational facilities. So business, when I say that some kind of a continuity of our services, so that is very important. And disasters are now known to disrupt these kind of services. And here, in fact, this is a new lesson that many times we have been doing some kind of assessment of the damage or impact caused by disasters, but long time we have been taking into consideration the economic losses and physical impacts, like loss, damage to building, or the loss in terms of money. But there is significant loss to environment and ecosystems also. For example, the cyclone Fani in fact affected a lot of forest ecosystems in Orissa, and because of that,
There's again some issue, no? Can you confirm if it is there with you?
Yes, yes.
it has occurred again.
Yes. So you were giving the example of cyclone Fani.
Yes. So In Cyclone Fani, in fact, the Chilka Lake was also affected, and the huge amount of forest was also affected. And in fact, that has made local economy to get affected, and people's livelihood also got affected. Because I often say that any kind of climatic disasters, if we take example of flooding or cyclone, we save the life of the people and by evacuating them and keeping in the relief shelter. But when they go back and they find that their fish ponds are filled with the saline soil, their farmlands are filled with the sand and salt. And that kind, these kind of recovery is not very possible in the 5,000 rupees or 10,000 rupees, and it also takes so many years in recovery. And in fact, before those are recovered to fertile land, the new cyclone comes, because if we look at the intensity of cyclone in some areas, then flooding also. So these kind of issues are important. Like look at the damage to the ecosystems also, and damage to the infrastructure also, like the telecom network and all. So all infrastructure, that their resilience is important, and that is why in fact in many of the areas where these kind of damages took place in the past, now we are saying that the more investment has to be on resilient infrastructure. Government of India has recently taken a global initiative called CDRI, Coalition of Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. So India is one of the leader in that. Now this is the summary picture of the intervention that we did. We have been working with various state governments and also taking various pilots at district level. And this is basically an outcome of a long series of experience of almost 15 years. And we could evolve this climate resilience framework based on our work. And we say that the vulnerability is most important. So we need to understand the vulnerability, and therefore vulnerability assessment is very fundamental process. But we try to capture the vulnerability issues through a shared learning process. We do not say that we are an expert coming from outside. It is a highly participatory process that we recommend too. And then we work with the local people, we work with the local official in developing the resilience strategies. So that is important dimension. Now I'll be skipping some of the things and coming to this is again a summary of when we say that climate change adaptation is fundamental to disaster resilience and disaster resilience businesses also. There are three major pillars. One is economic resilience, other is ecosystem-based resilience, and third is engineering infrastructure resilience. We need to have the economic recovery potential. That is why the Prime Minister's Agenda 10 on disaster risk management also focuses on the risk coverage of all. So that people should have some kind of a backup plan. All, not only people, all kind of organizations, if they are having some kind of insurance on their back, so there is some kind of support system. Then whether it is a communication infrastructure, whether it is a transport infrastructure, whether it is a rail, road, airways, any kind of infrastructure, the design and implementation should be resilience one. If we recall the cyclone Hudhud, which Chennai flood, the Chennai airport was underwater. So if these kind of infrastructure functionality gets hampered because of disasters, then there is it is also causing severe economic losses, and it is no one else's money. It is our own money, basically, because it is a public money. It is a taxpayers' money. So now the government is giving focus that all the infrastructure should be designed in a resilient way. These are some of the products under our cooperation with the government of Germany. In fact, we have been implementing a program with government of Germany. The project was called as Environmental Knowledge for Disaster Risk Management. So we were looking at how various kind of environmental legislations contribute to disaster management, how the traditional wisdom can play a role in reducing disasters. Now, this is a very important study that we did jointly with the United Nations University Institute in Bonn, Germany. Very relevant because we had taken the examples of the hydropower plants in Uttarakhand here, that how the critical infrastructure are important. So this directly relates to what actually happened recently, few days before. That this was published in 2013, and we had told that whenever we designed a hydropower plant, we should have a two-way sustainability analysis. One, that the power plant should sustain the risk, but power plants should ensure that they are not creating additional risk to the people. or to the ecosystem of that area. So these kind of things we have been doing. Now we are also globally, jointly with the United Nations Environment Program, we are currently working to promote a new concept that is called as ecosystem approach to disaster risk reduction. In the other terms, we call it nature-based solutions. In fact, nature-based solutions now in fact, some of the corporate bodies have also come forward, and they have formed a group called Leaders for Nature. And in fact, now corporate world is also looking at that how nature-based solutions can help us solve several problems of climate resilience and disaster management. Like this is a recent publication on nature-based solutions I am showing here on a screen, and I just received this copy last week only. So we have published, and this is published from Germany by Springer Nature. So these kind of things. This is a kind of an outcome of a exercise of around 18 months. We worked as a pilot with the support of CDKN, that how climate change adaptation should be integrated along with disaster risk management into the district level departmental plans. Because ultimately, whatever we discuss at international level, national level, ultimately district is the most important unit of governance in our country. So how district planning should take care of these things, and not only district planning, the various departments, various key departments within the district. So this was a module, then we shared it with all the districts in the country. Then key departments, how to identify the key departments, and then key departments envisage this CCA and DRR. CCA is climate change adaptation and DRR is disaster risk reduction. Now, when we worked at the urban level, we say that looking at the systems, agents, and institutions, and there in fact a kind of the scaling up and scaling down both have taken place. Like we looked at the neighborhood level, then we looked at the kind of a corporator or the ward level resilience building, and then looking at the city. So a participatory approach, a process of participatory approach in city resilience against the climate change and disasters. These are some of the outcomes of our research. Like this was the first publication on process framework for climate resilient and disaster safe development. This was published based on some work in Orissa, the district collector's handbook on climate resilient disaster management. This was published in Oriya. It was translated in English and Hindi also. Then the policy paper that how the state action plan on climate change and the disaster management plan should be integrated, and there should be some kind of a convergence between the two. This is an outcome of a study that we did on climate resilience in Bundelkhand region, which is a chronically drought-prone area. Then this is again a compilation of 40 case studies across India and Germany, that is a kind of a cross-learning between developed countries and developing countries. And this was a publication based on understanding of the strategic tools. For example, how the cost-benefit analysis and how the catastrophic modeling can help us understand various kind of disasters like what recently happened also. Then this is the initiative of a state government. Government of Maharashtra recently established a center of climate disaster resilience at their forest academy in Chandrapur. So these kind of initiatives are also there. Now, when we talk of urban resilience, we also found that many times we discuss about urban and many times we discuss about rural, but very rarely we discuss about the peri-urban systems, which is somewhere in transition, but there is no planning protocol for the peri-urban area. But peri-urban area, most of the poor people living there, our waste is discharged there, our effluent is discharged there, but on the other hand, most of our warehouses are there. That is the place of mandi, grain mandi, that is the place of the labor market. So it has a lot of significance, and therefore how the ecosystems in peri-urban areas play significant role in providing resilience against climate change. So this was a process guidance supported by developed under a project supported by the Rockefeller Foundation. Then this was a study on heat wave. This is a policy paper on Prime Minister's Agenda 10 on disaster risk management that is available on the website also. This was a discourse that how each and every ministry of the government of India should prepare a disaster management plan. Recently, we prepared the plan for Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, disaster management plan. And currently, we are supporting Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change for preparing a disaster management plan, and also the Department of Chemicals and Petrochemicals. So these kind of initiatives. Now, and then how various social segments are affected by disasters, and particularly the climate-related disasters. So these were a study and some publications jointly with the UNICEF that how children are affected. So these were the kind of publications. There's water and sanitation. So, and recently, currently we are implementing a major project, as we are also hosting a Center of Excellence on Climate Resilience under the National Action Plan on Climate Change. So we are implementing this project called CAPRES, Climate Adaptive Planning for Resilience and Sustainability. So 5 thematic areas like green growth, public health, resilient infrastructure, climate smart disaster management, and looking at the policy instruments for climate adaptation. So various kind of projects that we are implementing. We are supporting various kind of ministries also. We are joining hands with several international institutions also. These are a glimpse of some of the publications that we publish, and many of these are available on my ResearchGate also. So if any of the participants who are interested, they can look at these. Some of the materials are freely downloadable, and they can take the benefit. This is a publication on Uttarakhand flood 2013. And I especially referred here because there actually we had already given some of the important recommendations that how the infrastructure in hilly areas should be protected, particularly like the glacier floods and the flash floods. These are the latest publications. This includes a publication on the recent coronavirus pandemic also. And I will skip these, and as the time is limited, but I come to this that when we talk of disaster resilience, when we should also look at the sustainability regime. A sustainability regime, we take the lessons from Lord Buddha, as Lord Buddha always talked about the middle path. So we need the infrastructure growth, we need materialistic growth, but we also need to take care of our environment and climate also. And in fact, when we try to strike a balance, that is the concept of middle path, will also provide us resilience against the climate risk. At the end, we need to have a plan. Whatever knowledge is there, let us convert into plan. Whether we are working in an organization, whether we are living in a city, whether we are living in a village, we should have some kind of a planning process. This is a cartoon that how even animals are sitting and talking about their plan. But plan should not be like this. This is also a lesson that plan should not be like this. It should be simple. It should be concise. It should be easily understandable. So with this, I'm very thankful for inviting me to share some of my thoughts at this occasion. And now if there are some questions, I would be willing to take the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Very inspirational work that you are doing, and you actually are the doyen of knowledge in the field of disaster risk reduction and management. Thank you for sharing your insights with us. A lot of work would actually flow out from your own work, and it is really inspirational. Thank you so much, sir. Sir, you rightly pointed out about the environmental slowdown, which is directly proportional to economic slowdown. It actually requires a lot of intellectual insights to present this hypothesis as a valid hypothesis, and it has a great deal of understanding that can yield to the policymakers. And as you mentioned that we need to follow a middle path, because one of our participants have mentioned that development is costing the environment and it is unsustainable. But there has to be certain amount of middle path, because it is two-way process. Exploitation of natural resources, whether it should be exploitation or whether it should be harnessing of natural resources, that remains to be really affirmed. And I think that harnessing is more important, because we are thinking of our future generations also. So, sir, thank you so much. And there are a couple of questions. I would, and some of them are in fact from the Chamoli incident. Is that recent Chamoli incident is not new. We have already witnessed the Kedarnath floods, which you have already mentioned. So why? I think that it really makes a sense that case that we are going to do something. Maybe you would be taking it up, Uttarakhand Disaster 2.0, with this recent disaster. So it killed more than 5,000 people in 2013 and many more. And this phenomenon is running from the 1990s. Why is 20 years less time to understand the consequences of these events? Because you have already done such analysis, and you have also done a lot of work on environmental impact assessment. why, even we know that dams and bridges are a threat to environment, why are we still pursuing these projects? Because this is a very persisting question in our minds, that we know that there's going to be some negative impacts. Why are we not prepared for it? If you could respond to it.
I would have a mixed kind of a reaction to this. I would not say that there is no preparedness. If we look at 2000 pre-2013 situation as a reference, in most of the states there has been improvement. In fact, if we recall, 2013 was a devastating flood in Uttarakhand, but the same year, after a few months, it was a cyclone Phylin, and in cyclone Phylin, we had around 6 casualties, which are in fact normal even without the cyclone. These are the normal number of deaths that can take place in if we account 5-6 districts. So there has been learning and there has been improvement, but there is also room of continual improvement. That is important. Then it is also an important thing that energy is a requirement of the country. Our country requires more and more energy. But on the other hand, I cannot just blindly say that since we require a lot of energy, we should move ahead blindly. No, we have to move with adequate caution and more prudent site selection and design process. And we also need to look at the alternatives. For example, Government of India has recently taken another global initiative, that is of the Global Solar Alliance. So these kind of alternatives will reduce our dependence on the conventional energy systems like hydropower systems or the thermal power systems. So certainly we are trying to move ahead in that direction. Yes, what happened in Uttarakhand, there are certain scopes of improvement, like if we have better monitoring and alert system. But so one thing is we have better monitoring and alert system for these kind of incidences, particularly the glacial melt and glacial related floods. But equally important is that, as I referred to a few days before, just 2 days before, I was in some other discussion, and I referred to that the people who are from that area, like the people from Uttarakhand, they know, they can even guess the risk by the noise. But the people who were coming, the workers who were from other states, they were not trained, they were not adequately, their capacities were not built. So in an industrial system or any kind of system, we say that we need to ensure the capacity building and safety of the contract workers also. So that is also important. So this is one thing. Then there has to be some kind of a catastrophic modeling. And many times we say that we should always look at the worst case scenario also and the lower order risk also, both. Because the lower order risk also always gives some kind of indication that this situation is risky. I don't say that we should not venture into risk. Risk is always there. Risk is important and we have to learn to live with risk also. But how, to what extent to accept the risk? There is a concept of risk acceptance. When we ride a bicycle in road, on traffic, there is always some risk. But we accept the risk and we use helmet, we use other safety laws to protect ourselves. Similarly, here also we have to accept the risk, but to what extent to accept the risk? When the risk is beyond acceptable, you have to bring down that risk to that acceptable level. So whether you do technological interventions, like you improve your engineering designs, or you have alternative sites, or you provide levy. If you have an idea that some kind of a catastrophic scenarios can take place, then you can think of creating some kind of a levy. So whenever there is a huge amount of water, it can get alternative ways. But yes, talking here is relatively easy. Doing on the ground sometimes has more difficulty. That is also, sometimes there is a conflict when one set of engineers, another set of engineers, they discuss. But yes, any kind of disaster gives us very important understanding. Like in the Sikkim, some kind of a glacier monitoring equipment has been installed. Similarly, we have to see that how we improve the monitoring system effectiveness, and we improve the communication system also, so that we can provide more effective alert. Then better coordination. The government has several agencies, then there are certain private agencies also. There is a ISRO. So how to have more quick coordination of information. So that is also important thing. So all these things are need to learn. And then as I told earlier, that we need to move to alternative sources of energy which can ensure better safety of people also.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, also, you have really invested a lot of your time in developing new approaches like Eco-DRR, CCA-DRR, which you have just presented, and you have tried to integrate it into the mainstream development process, policy process. Could you briefly tell us about their implementation status? And also, we know that the budget 2021 has reduced some amount of money to the Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change. But on the other hand, when we have our Prime Minister speaking at the World Sustainable Development Forum with very loud views on climate change, how does it reconcile when we are cutting down the funding?
We should also look at the kind of a diversification. Now, climate change, although also MOEFCC is the nodal ministry of climate change for climate change, but there are number of institutions, in fact, which are contributing to the climate change area. For example, Ministry of Jal Shakti, even Ministry of Urban Development, that is working on the smart city. So there is a smart city climate assessment framework that is also going on. Now, in fact, we are looking at how Manrega can also contribute, because whatever work we are getting done by these Manrega workers, can that money be used as an investment to for doing an earthwork for protection against the impact of climate change? So and that is the actual thing actually. That is the correct approach also. That rather than having always a isolated funding, we should go into mainstream. So whether we are doing rural development, whether we are doing urban development, now in fact there has been a recent study that how industries are affected by the impact of climate change. Because whenever temperature goes high, they need more water for cooling. There are fire incidences. So even the Ministry of Industry is also looking. So the money being spent on climate adaptation and climate resilience is from various sources, not only one sources. Then we have adaptation fund. Adaptation fund is being managed by NABARD. NABARD is an agency related with rural development. So we cannot say that everything is being done only by MOEF. MOEF is a coordinating ministry, as it is the face to sit in the negotiation at the international level. We need to have one agency to put a dialogue with the external agencies. But in India, there are so many institutions. Like we are affiliated with Ministry of Home Affairs. And then it is associated with the Prime Minister's office. So we are also working in this, and that budget doesn't come from MOEFCC. That budget comes from our own money. So we should look at this also. And then we say that even each and every city, or the urban local body, or panchayat level planning should also integrate the climate change adaptation related interventions in their own budget. Basically, we have to start looking from that point. Whatever we do, whether you are working in your kitchen or whether you are taking bath in the washroom, if we inculcate that thing, that can you think about that how you are contributing to, you are reducing to climate change. So actually, we have to go down to that level, and that is why we say that whether it is urban planning, rural planning, industrial planning, let us even recently we have started talking about the green hospitals. Like we are now saying that the hospital should have big infrastructure, but hospital require energy, hospital require lighting. So can we think of solar lighting in hospitals, except in the operation theater, so that it will be reducing your carbon footprint. So this is the kind of approach that we are looking at.
Yes, sir. So you mean to say that ecosystem services can be incorporated at the grassroots level also?
Yes,
So,
yes.
so do you think that environmental impact assessments and environmental audits, these are quite taken for granted? And do we really should we really focus on these assessments and take the insights of the experts before we are really sanctioning a project instead of uh,
I,
really.
I, I totally agree. In fact, EIA is something very close to my heart, the subject,
Mm,
and EIA is highly respected tool globally. But in some of the countries like India, actually there are a lot of flaws because EIA is not wrong thing. The tool is not wrong. How EIA is done. If the data is put wrongly, then certainly the outcomes would be wrongly. So EIA, if EIA is a manipulated report or malintended report, so those things are wrong. So there has to become some kind of systems of cross verifications.
mm,
And here I would say that since EIA has become most of the game of the consultants, at least some other agencies, if they come voluntarily and do some kind of a cross check that what is projected in EIA and what is the correct scenario, some kind of then we can some kind of awareness. And what happens that EIA is done by highly learned people and qualified people. EIA reports are prepared in English language, highly technical language, and then there is a process of public hearing, and public is not knowing any of the technical terms. So what, there is a huge gap. There is a huge gap. So somewhere we need to pitch in that there also, and then otherwise also people should stop looking at EIA as something anti-developmental. We say that EIA is to hamper the development. No, EIA is to correct the development so that it sustains.
mm. Absolutely. I totally agree, sir. So there's a question by your former colleague from Dehradun who wants
Dr.
Dr.
Viswas.
Viswas. He wants to know your views regarding the indicator species and traditional knowledge on ecosystem with regard to disaster emotion as a core.
I would say that is very important, and in fact, I am looking for some. I am trying to work out some field, some team to undertake some case study that how these indicators help us provide some kind of early warning, like we hear the of some forest ecosystems where some dams have been built. There is a different kind of species coming. Entire pattern is changing. Entire biodiversity is changing. So that is also indicating the flooding scenario or the flood vulnerability. So can we have that? As on could not generate any kind of model. All that there are capacities we can use these indicators, but we could not develop some kind of standards. So in case we can make a team and we find some people to work with us, we can really take some kind of case studies. And when we have some kind of case, we can put an argument at the policy that yes, this should be integrated.
Certainly, sir. So actually, we are at IMPRI, we are doing an SSRC funded study on environmental refugees. We're looking at the disasters in the coastal areas of India, where we have really focused on the role of indigenous knowledge in as a forewarning system for flash floods or cyclones. And it has been quite interesting to note that there are knowledge that is prevailing at the grassroots level. So it would certainly be very interesting to
Yes,
explore.
in fact, if we look at the hilly areas, or if we look at the areas and also the desert areas, all the disaster prone areas, if we look at the traditional knowledge has been very significant, and people were using for their coping strategy, but somehow it got depleted. So if we can on that and we can help that mainstream, that will be of.
Have we lost sir again?
Some issues.
Yeah, I think he'll rejoin.
Hello? Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm. I think it is saying me to stop or what?
We still want to learn so much from you. Yes, sir, please continue.
Yeah. So I was saying, in fact, that is in my mind also. So if IMPRI is interested, we can discuss and we can take up some joint initiative, and we can have a we can jointly organize a discourse on this theme: climate-induced migration and disaster-related migration.
Yes, absolutely.
Refugee, I do not say, because refugee has a legal terminology. Refugee is a legal terminology, and it is defined internationally. So we cannot actually say them refugee. Refugee, it is defined in the international law. So we cannot say a person who seeks refuge in any other country, as per the institutes of law, is a refugee. So I can say migrants are, we can say migration. Yeah.
Yes, yes, sir. Absolutely. Actually, this is a four-country study, so that is why it was refugees. But certainly,
No,
we
scientifically, I agree. Academically, I agree. But being the government, we have to follow the international regulations that are on us, and that is on. Yeah.
we're actually looking at internal migrants only, and for India, we are using the term migrants, internal
Yeah,
migrants.
and in fact, yesterday also, when Prime Minister of India and Maldives also, they referred. In fact, that was indicating on these things also, that even that how climate change is posing threat to national security also, because of these issues also. Yeah. So I think it is a very important area of concern for all of us, and we can discuss and we can do something jointly also.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Thank you so much, sir. So before we end, I would just like to know from you, what are the best practices which we can draw from the developed countries, or even of the same status as in, in Asia. Of course, they have all the countries have different geographies and terrains, etc., and different climatic zones. So, if there are any comparabilities, and what are the best practices that we could draw from them to avoid disasters, and disasters means losses of lives. Of course, economic development will take its own course, but if people are safe and secure, they lead happy lives. So ultimately that would lead to peace and order in the society. So if you would just
Yes, this is a complex question, and my answer is going to be complex.
Yes.
Because recently what we saw in Corona, and now we all realize that American dream is over. So if you say the lessons only from developed countries, I would not agree. I say the lessons of other countries, I say that. Yes, there are good lessons from developed countries also, but there are good lessons even for the not developed, the least developed countries also, are the lesser developed. We also have to learn the good lessons from Sri Lanka, which is a smaller country, are the Maldives. If anything good, like the micro insurance kind of things, we need to learn from Bangladesh. So and that is why now globally we are talking of the South-South cooperation, like the kind of challenges that we face. Those are more applicable for lessons in Africa, are the kind of lessons, the traditional knowledge in Africa, African countries, that may be useful for us. So that is also important. But yes, the issues like early warning systems, where technology-driven things that we certainly can learn from the developed nations. But if we are talking about the community-based interventions, the good examples are with us. Our traditional knowledge, good examples are with us. So it is both way. I recall being a part of the delegation with the government of discussing with the government of Japan. They now they are focusing on community-based lessons, because they have done a lot on technology-based interventions, but they want to learn that how India has promoted community-based interventions. So there is always a scope for cross learning, and that is why now we are promoting more and more the exchange kind of a programs, are the peer learning. We say peer learning, so we learn from you, you learn from us. So there is a huge opportunity. Technology we can learn from developed countries, and other ways we can learn. And one thing, now nature-based solutions, some of the other countries, they have actually put into mainstream. So that is something we need to learn. We say that Prakriti hamari mata hai, and we worship nature, but really putting nature conservation into our system. So that is still not there. So we need to bring that into mainstream. So that is still to learn. Yeah. You're not audible, Simi.
Sorry, sir. In fact, thank you. In fact, China has really started vigorously working on this area, and
Yeah.
we can really draw parallels and, in fact, forge hands that would actually.
Exactly.
Yes, sir. And there are BRI projects which are going through the Northeast, and then Act East policy, the Asian Highway, etc. is happening. And then there are whole sorts of lot of issues with respect to Northeastern states dam development, where people are, protesting, and then they really want their natural resources back. So perhaps we can really look forward to having a middle way where
Exactly. That is the only way, because we want development also, but we need to protect the ecosystems also. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank
it
you.
was a delight to have you and to listen to your expert views. Certainly, we will keep in touch, and we'll let you know about our work that we are doing, and get your advice and partner with you eventually. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Dr. Arjun Saab, and to you, and to the entire team. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So I'll just propose the formal vote of thanks. I thank Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development, India Water Portal, Team IMPRI, and Professor Anil Kumar Gupta. Of course, Harshit, you have been constantly in touch with us. Thank you so much, and we look forward to learning more from you, sir. Thank you, and wish you a very good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Gupta. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saab.
Have a nice evening.